But typically, he'd studied every British-made lock and key he'd been able to lay his strong fingers on. His most valuable possession was a collection he'd made of these keys and a suave ability to use them with his toes.
So the first thing he did was familiarize himself with English handcuffs, and he found that the standard Scotland Yard handcuff of the period could be opened if you just knew how to bang it at the right spot. So he went to Scotland Yard and offered to get out of their cuffs, and Superintendent Melville locked him in a pair, and Houdini stepped into the other room and came back free. And Melville was sport enough to tell him that that was great and admit that he had escaped from those darbies, as they called them, and the next thing you knew, Houdini was being booked throughout England.
He'd caught on. Throughout the country and throughout the rest of Europe, he soon became top of the bill. The formula of the exploitation of free publicity, followed by a high-priced stage act, plus the public challenge, had taken Houdini where he felt he belonged. He was happy to take on the world, and happy if the world took on him. To the public of Europe, he was fair game. Houdini in town meant Houdini challenged, sometimes from the most unlikely quarters. The secret of the rope escape lay in his phenomenal muscular and bodily control. He'd expand his muscles to their considerable limit whilst being tied. It mattered not at all how many times a rope was knotted around him, for later, muscular contraction would give him enough working space for his powerful fingers to effect a release.
Some people had a huge butter churn, and they wanted to put Houdini in that and clamp the lid on the top. The lid went flat on the top, and then clamps were thrown over. So it wasn't a question of padlocks or handcuffs. It was a case of getting through this woodwork and somehow getting those clamps open. Well, Houdini, as he always did with his challenges, figured some way to beat this thing. And in this particular case, he supposed there'd be a good way that he could wedge his way out. Drives a sort of a wedge in between the top and of the churn and the lid, and spring the clamps.